The Chicago Bulls continue to be exactly who they are, a very frustrating team. With the loss versus the Atlanta Hawks last night, somehow, some way, the Chicago Bulls still managed to clinch a play-in berth, but it doesn't leave much confidence. Y'all know we're going to talk about it and break it down, but you got to hear the music first.
Cognac, gang.
Shy Boys Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's episode of Shy Boys Podcast. If you're tuned in with me today, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. Now, me and C-Dub, prior to the game, we had a discussion, and we really came out and we discussed the Chicago Bulls versus the Atlanta Hawks. Right now, in the current standing, the 9th seed versus the 10th seed, before the game tipped off. And it was the belief that that game last night was probably one of the biggest games for the Chicago Bulls this season, if not the biggest. And we expected the Chicago Bulls to come out with some intensity. We were a little worried. We were a little cautious for trying to give the Chicago Bulls a lot of respect. But we believe that with all the talk that was coming out from the Chicago Bulls locker room about how they're fighting for their lives, how they have to figure things out, how guys need to step up, et cetera, all things said, the Chicago Bulls came out there last night, put on a really good first half, and let everything slip away in that second half. The Chicago Bulls fell to the Atlanta Hawks 113-101 in what was I wouldn't even say a tough loss. It was just a loss that at this point you're now pretty numb to when it comes to the Chicago Bulls team. The Chicago Bulls, if you look at the stats as a team, they were okay, but not good enough. When the Chicago Bulls come out and win a turnover battle, they only had 8 while the Atlanta Hawks had 15. You think that the Chicago Bulls have a chance. But they didn't shoot well from the field as a team, only 39%, while the Hawks went 50%. They didn't shoot well from the three, only 25%, and the Atlanta Hawks 47% from the three. The Chicago Bulls only logged in 7 3-pointers as a team, while the Atlanta Hawks more than doubled that, almost tripled it, with 19 3-pointers for the game. The same old story, the same old team. And that's just what it really comes down to. But the crazy part is that the Chicago Bulls, they find themselves holding down and clinching themselves a play-in berth. But it's not much to be confident about. That's just what it really, that's what it really comes down to. At one point, me and C-Dub even just held out the question, say, hey, what if the Chicago Bulls continue to lose? Can the Brooklyn Nets squeak in? But the Brooklyn Nets been losing games themselves after beating us. So the Bulls have a little cushion to where they're going to be all right. The Chicago Bulls right now just seem like a team that's going through the motion. They seem like a team that's ready to clock out. The Chicago Bulls seem like a team that's already made plans for the offseason. We know what they should be fighting for, and those is 2 things. You should be fighting for a playoff spot just to see where you can go with this, and you should be fighting for pride. In these last 7 games, the Chicago Bulls have not played with much pride, in my opinion. You got yourself 2 wins out of the last 7 games, but you lost 5 games. You lost games against the Houston Rockets, and you could have won that game. You lost games against the Washington Wizards when they played their G Leaguers and they had their 2-way contract players out there. You lost this game versus the Atlanta Hawks. And the crazy thing is that we know the Bulls have the potential to compete with a lot of teams around the league and stay in games. You just beat the number 1 seed at that time, the Minnesota Timberwolves. But the Bulls have not been consistent. That's the biggest thing for this team. You have to be consistent down the stretch in this if you want to make some type of noise, heading into the play-in and heading into the playoffs. Those teams that really are taking things seriously and fighting for something, they're trying to establish some consistency. Right now, the Chicago Bulls, after being so close to being at 500, they completely fumbled the bag. They completely dropped the ball. They completely fell off the face of the earth. They're completely let everyone down. There's nothing much to be confident about right now. I'm still going to rock with the Bulls because that's the squad. But it's not much to be confident about. And to be quite frank with you, I'm ready for it all to be over myself. Let's move on and talk about how we can make this team better, because as of right now, this team stinks. Yes, we have some great moments. Yes, there's a lot of things that we can point out and have some positives about. But the thing right now, the state of the Chicago Bulls right now, it's very depressing, because you know this team can be a lot better and they choose not to be. That comes from the coach on to the players. Now, the players are going to give the majority of the blame on this. But let's not forget about Billy Donovan and his coaching staff for the failure to put their players in positions to win these games, to counter what the hell is being thrown at you from the opposing team. That's the same thing that we've been bringing up all season long, the previous season, and the season before that. 3 seasons of this bullcrap. Last night, the Chicago Bulls allowed a player by the name Krejic, I'm sorry if I messed up the name, to go ahead and get a career high. 6 threes. Allowed him to cook. And that's not the first of many. I mean, that's not the first occurrence when somebody we really don't know nothing about comes into the United Center, or the Chicago Bulls goes to their stadium, and they let a guy come out and have his coming out party. The Chicago Bulls line up at the door. They don't even check their IDs. They give him free drinks. They give him a little eye show, you know what I'm saying? A little eye show. And they even give him a few ones so they can have a good time, if you know what I mean. That's what the Chicago Bulls do just about all the time when they face teams and there's a young guy trying to make a name for himself and have a good coming out party. I understand that the Chicago Bulls could potentially climb up the ranks, but let's keep it a buck. That's out of the question. The Chicago Bulls literally would have to win every game on their schedule to give themselves a fighting chance like that, but I don't see that happening. I really don't. Right now, next up, later this week, you have a matchup versus the New York Knicks, a very tough team with a guy like Jalen Brunson who can absolutely annihilate the Chicago Bulls. I know we're going to go off revisionist history and say, well, Ayo Dosunmu has had those good games versus Jalen Brunson. DeMar DeRozan has had spectacular performances versus the New York Knicks. But right now, it ain't the time for that. We have to look at the Chicago Bulls for what they really are. And that's a mid team who's going to be in most games, but then falter in others. Who's going to show up in some games and then fizzle out in the second half of games. Who's going to not show up in the first half and then fight and get close in the second half so they can insert themselves into another clutch game. That's the only thing we can lean on, is that the Chicago Bulls are one of the most clutch teams in the NBA. That's what we can lean on right now. But it ain't good enough. That's just what it is. I understand the Chicago Bulls have clinched themselves a play-in spot, but it ain't much to be confident in. You know what I'm saying? You should be fighting to keep home court advantage. But for some strange reason, the Chicago Bulls, when they play at home, there's no pride in that home crowd cheering their ass on. What are we doing? Chicago. This is Chicago. And their performances at home in front of the home crowd have been abysmal all season long. They need to do better, and that's why it's time to wrap it up. The way that what we need to be talking about moving forward is, will the young guys get more playing time? Because enough is enough of seeing this shit. Let's see if we can find a young guy that will be like, I bet with the offseason, this player can potentially get some more minutes. And I'm talking about Orlap Bitim, whose minutes has gone away. I'm talking about Adama Sanogo, who we haven't really seen. Hell, I don't give a damn if you bring up Henry Drell from the G League. Let's see these young guys in NBA action so we can start seeing some flashes if they can flash and see if they can be a part of this team for the future, because we know what's going to happen in this play-in. At least that's what we can believe. Knowing the Chicago Bulls, they get in this play-in, they mess around and win the first game, get us all lovey-dovey and cheering up for them and rooting for them, and they falter in that second game. Or hell, they might shock the world and make the playoffs. But it's not much confidence in that. The approach moving forward, it should be, let's finish this season with pride. Let's finish this season for the city of Chicago. Let's finish this season for us. Let's finish this season so we can go into this offseason with some confidence, because as of right now, the confidence is out the damn window. That's just what it is. We got a lot of positives to come out of this season, but the way that it's ending, it's not ending on a good note. So we need to let it rest where it may rest. We need to leave it where it's going to be and just continue to push forward. Major changes should be coming this offseason. Major. I'm so serious. And I ain't going to get it too far into that, but at one point, I was all for bringing DeMar DeRozan back. And then I was off that. And then I turned around and said I'm cool with that. You know what I'm saying? It's been kind of like a dicey situation. But as of right now, anything should be on the table. Any player should be ready to walk out the door, except some of the guys that you see a future with. And I say that's very limited. You got some for sure spades up in there that you want to continue to push this through with. I believe that's Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, and Patrick Williams. And you got a few possibles. But I think they will stick around. That's your Julian Phillips, your Dalen Terry. See what you got in Batum. See what you got in Sanagu. And let's see if these guys are capable of being a part of this organization moving forward. Because Nikola Vucevic is not your answer at the center spot. This current scheme that you're running for the offense, it's terrible. You'd never get up enough shots from the three-point line in the three-point shooting league. That's how the Chicago Bulls shoot themselves out of games. It's not necessarily a horrible game that they put on against the Atlanta Hawks, but when they shoot 19 threes and you only shoot 7, you're going to lose that game. So it's a lot of things, man. But this play-in berth, it don't give us much confidence to think about any of that stuff. It's just going to say, hey, we're going to root them on, but we will temper those expectations as well. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. I'm ready for football, y'all. I ain't going to lie. But, hey, that's it for me today, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead and talking about this play-in berth that the Bulls, are now going to get. They're going to have a play-in matchup versus the Atlanta Hawks, likely, unless something crazy happens from the 7 and 8 seed. I don't see happening. And we'll go from there. Leave your comments below. Let's chop it up. Let's talk about it, and we'll see what happens. It's a bad day. It's not a bad day because we kind of expected it, but it ain't nothing to get too hyped about. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of Shy Boys Podcast. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe before you go. I'm going to catch you on the next one for sure.
Cognac.